Hello, boys and girls. Okay, this is going to be my last screencast for today because this is like the fifth one I've done in a row. And it's 10 after 3 and I want to go home. So today we're going to talk about simplifying fractions. Now, when you simplify fractions, what you're doing is you're taking larger fractions and making them into the smallest equivalent fraction that you can. And the reason you want to do this is because later when we get into working with changing denominators into common denominators, there's going to be a lot of division and multiplying going on, and it is a lot easier to multiply something by 5 than to multiply something by 16. So that's part of the reason why. And you always kind of want to have your work in simplest form. So for the rest of fractions, we're really going to be concentrating on you being able to recognize if a number is in simplest form and putting it into simplest form. So in your math journal, title this page Simplifying Fractions, and that is putting fractions into the lowest possible form. So they can't go any smaller. Now, a couple of things that you need to remember, that when I say putting fractions, they always are going to be equivalent fractions. So simplifying fractions is taking an equivalent fraction and making it smaller. So when you think about it, we will never be multiplying, because when you multiply something, you make it bigger. So whenever we are simplifying fractions, we're making it smaller, so we will be dividing. Okay? So, for example, let's take 16/20. And just like I've been saying since the beginning of fractions, whatever you do the numerator, you need to do the denominator. So when we're dividing, we are going to be doing the same to the numerator as to the denominator. Okay? So with my number 16/20, we are going to look at this and we're going to come up with what we call the greatest common factor. So that's another word you need to know. GCF stands for the greatest common factor. So that's always the first thing you're going to do, is find out what the factors are for your numbers. So now when I'm looking at my 16/20, now as a reminder, I'm going to move this 16/20 of finding factors. We did this way back when we started multiplying. So 16/20, we want to know all of the factors that are going to equal 16. Remember, the factors are the two numbers you multiply together to get the product. So for 16, remember we started on one end, 1 times 16, 2 times 8. 3 doesn't go, you cannot multiply anything by 3 to get 16. 4 times 4. And that's where I know I'm going to stop. Same thing with 20. 1 times 20. 2 times 10. 3 you cannot multiply. 4 times 5. And then I go to 5, so now I'm going backwards. So remember, we stop once we get to the other side. Now, when I look at this, I see two common factors. 2 is common in both, and 4 is common in both. The key word is greatest. So 4 is my greatest number. So step number 1 is to find your greatest common factor. Step number 2 is to divide the numerator and the denominator by that greatest common factor. Divide the numerator and denominator by the GCF, greatest common factor. Okay, so I'm going to take my 16/20ths. 4 is my greatest common factor. I'm going to divide them both by 4. 16 divided by 4 is 4. 20 divided by 4 is 5. So 4/5 is equivalent to 16/20ths, and it is in simplest form. Okay? Now, let's say you have that 16/20ths, and you mess up a little bit. You see that the 2 is common in both of them, but you don't really notice the 4. So you divide them both by 2. Hey, that's okay. 16 divided by 2 is 8. 20 divided by 2 is 10. Well, when I look at 8/10, I can see that it is still not as low as it could go because they're both even numbers. So I know that 2 can go into both of them. So I'm going to go again. So 8 divided by 2 is 4. 10 divided by 2 is 5. And there we go with the 4/5 again. So even if you just pick out a common factor, it works. You just have an extra step. When you pick out the greatest common factor, you're able to do it in just one step. Okay, so that is how you simplify. Now, how do we know if we have to simplify? Well, we know if we have to simplify if there's a common factor. If there's no common factors, then it's in simplest form, and you don't need to simplify. And the more you look and see fractions, the easier it's going to get to see if there's a common factor. So, example, if I have 17/21, okay, and I want to put this into lowest terms, lowest form, simplest form. Those all mean the same thing. Well, when I look at this number, I know 17 is a prime number, which means this is in lowest form. Okay? So you can't assume just because you've got high numbers as your numerator and denominator that that's going to mean that it can go into simplest form. Sometimes it's already in simplest form if there is not a common denominator. Even, let's take the number 8/15. So neither of them are prime. 8 has a bunch of factors. 1 and 8, 2 and 4. 3 doesn't. 4, we're back over here. And same thing, 1, 15, 2 doesn't. 3, 5. So these are the factors for 8 and 15. None of them are common. There's except for 1. And we don't count 1 because if I divide 8 divided by 1 and 15 divided by 1, you're still at 8/15. So that means 8/15 is in lowest form, simplest form, lowest terms. Okay? Now you may have noticed that I've been squaring my answers. From this point on, what I'd like you to do is to always square your answers, because now that you're going to be simplifying, you're going to have a lot of fractions in a problem. You know, especially when we had this problem down here, you know, all these numbers, well, I don't know which one is your final answer. So when you square your answer, I know that's your final answer and that's the one that you want me to look at. Otherwise, I don't know, is he telling me 16/20 is his final answer, 8/10? So always square your answers. Okay, let's do one more together, and then I'll have you do some problems. So let's take 15/18. Okay, so let's see. My common factors. Well, we just did them up there, so I'm just going to copy them right from there. No sense in doing more work. Okay, now my 18. 1, and 18, 2 and 9, 3 and 6, 4 doesn't, 5 doesn't, then we're off to 6. So now when I'm looking at this, I see 1's common, 2, so I can see 3 is common, and that is my greatest common factor. So my second step is to take my 15 18ths, divide them both by 3. 15 divided by 3 is 5. 18 divided by 3 is 6. 5/6 is in my lowest terms, simplest form. Okay? So here's a couple for you to try. I would like you to put 8 24ths in simplest form, 3/7 in simplest form, and 4/16 in simplest form. Okay, when you're done, pause the video. Okay, so now I'm looking at this. Let's see. 1 and 8, 2 and 4. 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, 6, 4 and 6. Okay, I can see 8 is my most common factor. So 8 24ths divided by 8 divided by 8 equals 1. 24 divided by 8 is 3. Final answer is 1/3. Looking at this, 7 prime, 3 prime. So that means 3/7 is in lowest, simplest form. Okay, here we go. 1, 4, 2, 2. 1, 16, 2, 8, 3 doesn't, 4 and 4. 4, so 4/16, divide them both by 4, equals 1/4. And that is in simplest form. Okay, so your keyword today is silly. And go ahead and work on your form to submit. Have a good afternoon. Bye.